Kevin Clark of The Ringer back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing great. A lot of sports to take in, Rich.
No question. That's why we put it in a bracket, you know? That's why we had to put it in a bracket.
The only way. If you have more than four things, you got to throw it in a bracket.
I will give you the floor on the Tyson Fury-Deontay Wilder fight that went down on Saturday night. What were your thoughts taking that one in, Kevin?
Well, I thought it was going to go. Actually, I might have been the only person who thought it was going to go that way. Deontay Wilder became vastly underrated in the past 19 months, Rich. I mean, it's a little bit like a football team where we see them lose one game and we just sort of get off the bandwagon. Wilder still was the hardest puncher in the sport. Tyson Fury was talking about that going into the third fight last week. He was saying, guys, Deontay Wilder still has the hardest right hand in boxing. And so this was always on the table that he was going to change his game plan a little bit. He was more aggressive. He only landed 9 jabs, but he threw them. He changed his game plan a little bit. That's what he had to do. So Fury's the better boxer. If they fought 100 times, Fury would win the vast majority of them. But I was not surprised there were some knockdowns because when Deontay Wilder gets in the ring with a guy, he knocks them down. That's how it normally happens. And that Wilder knocked him down in 2 of the 3 fights they've had. They're not going to have another fight, I assume. But we saw boxing at its best, basically, and we saw what over the 3 fights that these guys have had. We saw how boxers can change, the world can change, the sport can change. I loved it.
And I mean, when Wilder knocked down Fury,
yeah,
I mean, I just can't. I still can't get enough of the constant that it appears to be with these fights is the amount of seconds that Fury gets to get off the canvas. It happened again, do you think, with these 2 fighters? What do you think? That he got too much time to get up? What do you think there?
I mean, there's so many in heavyweight boxing, in high-level heavyweight boxing, Rich. There are so many questions going back to 1920s about long counts, right? And I think that guys you saw that when Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz in their first fight 3 Junes ago. People were saying Joshua was getting 17 seconds in some cases to actually re-engage because he kept getting knocked down. And he was the heavyweight champion in the world. So it's a gray area. I mean, I think there's still people who argue, Rich, in the first fight that with the fact that Tyson Fury basically his eyes were closed, that should have been waved off and was a knockout. People have argued that. Deontay Wilder has argued that. Jack Reese, the referee, said it was the best call in his career to let that go. So it's always a bit of a gray area. I thought it was a long count, but that's just high-level heavyweight boxing. But rules are meant to be bent in heavyweight high-level boxing.
Afterwards, Fury said that he told Wilder essentially, good fight, and Wilder said, I'm not going to do anything, respectful or... No sportsmanship
is what he said.
Right.
No sportsmanship.
What's up with that?
It's a good lesson. Listen, so I was at the second fight. I was at the first fight too, but I was at the second fight where Wilder lost. And I went over to the tunnel to watch him walk back in, and he looked as defeated as any athlete I've ever seen in my life. And I've been in Super Bowl locker rooms after a team lost. I've been in some pretty heavy-duty places as far as emotions go, and I've never seen somebody as upset as Wilder. I think that Wilder's ego was tied into the fact that he had knocked 40 guys out, and anybody he'd ever been in the ring with, he had knocked out. Even if he didn't knock them out the first time, he would fight them again and knock them out then. I've spent some time with Deontay Wilder. He's this swaggering personality, and I kind of think at age 35, he's not ready to consider himself anything other than that guy, than the guy who knocks people out whenever he gets in the ring with them. And I think he's having a tough time adjusting to this reality, and that is why I think you've seen him act a little pouty. Not a little pouty, a lot pouty in the two losses he's had.
So where does Fury now stand in terms of all time? One of the greatest ever?
He's up there. He's up there. He's gonna. I don't know. I mean, Usyk, who beat Anthony Joshua a couple weeks ago, now has the heavyweight championships. That fight's still out there. I mean, Fury. Everybody's been talking about what happens when Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury get in the same ring. They're both English. They're both hugely famous. You can sell out, a 90,000-seat stadium over there. It's going to be a rout. I mean, it is going to be a rout. Tyson Fury would destroy Anthony Joshua right now if they fought, unless Joshua makes huge changes to his game, which I don't see coming. So He's up there with the all-time greats. He's going to dominate this era of heavyweight. You know, he's talked about wanting to retire after a couple more fights. He's only 33. I don't see it, but I also see that I just don't. I see maybe only 2 heavyweights capable of even giving him an interesting fight. So there's not a lot for him out there. He's really, really good. He beat Klitschko. He beat Wilder. He's going to beat Joshua. He'll beat Usyk. Yeah, he's dominating in this era.
Well, what about the fact that nobody thought that another heavyweight era was going to matter? Right? I mean, let's be honest, because we're now in the era of UFC. We're now in the era of there's 50 million ways to take things in. I'm holding up my phone right here, you know, and there's so many different ways for us to not pay attention to something that we even get a sniff of the fact that is irrelevant. And then his own personal journey. I mean, I retweeted a video of his honest soliloquy when he was here 2 years ago about wanting to kill himself, and how he still battles mental health, and how he is in this 21st century, you know, a guy who looks like he's straight out of a Guy Ritchie movie who's going to be, you know, Lock, Stock, and Two Vinnie Jones, you know, that he comes across and he talks about mental health and he sings to fans after he wins. He serenades them. I mean, talk about it. Shot in the arm and what he means to the sport. It really is incredible. He's one of the all-time greats. You got to give it up, you know? Boxing
is always going to be personality driven. And it was funny because, or not funny, but what my wife and I went to the first fight as a fan, quite frankly. It was in LA and I just bought a ticket. And to illustrate kind of the journey, I showed her the video, when Tyson was in your studio, and she was all in after that because she understood the journey, and that's what boxing is about. On the other side, Wilder was going through all of this because he wanted to support his daughter. He was a beer delivery guy, and he went into a boxing gym and thought he could fight, and he could. And I think that at its best, boxing has the best stories, because it's just so real and raw, and there's no hiding. And that's, I think, part of the reason Wilder can't take losing is there's just no hiding from it. You can't blame it on a coach. You can't blame it on an offensive line. It's you and the other guy. And I think that the heavyweight division can matter if there's 2-3 good fights that everybody gets into. I think that it was really hard. I mean, listen, I was at the first fight just as a supporter of boxing in L.A., and it was not sold out between Wilder and Fury. I don't think a lot of people cared. Then they had that epic match. It built on itself. I went to the second one as a journalist. DiCaprio was there. Mahomes was there. Khalil Mack was there. It became a huge, huge thing. I did not see Mahomes and DiCaprio at the first one at the Staples Center, okay? But boxing has a way of building on itself, and that's what you have to give these two guys credit for, is they entertained us so much they got us talking about heavyweight boxing again, when frankly, I'm with you. I thought boxing was going to be more middleweights, more featherweights, more welterweights. Heavyweight boxing for right now is back.
Brockman and TJ were at that first fight. I don't know if were you not close to
well, we ran into Kevin in the lobby, but yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Clark, you ran into them there in the rotunda?
Famously, Brockman said he wanted to bet on a draw and didn't do it.
Yep.
That is
I think I might have talked him out of it.
That is, by the way, that is so on brand. I can't tell you how on brand that is. That's amazing. Kevin Clark of The Ringer here on the Rich Eisen Show. So did you get any sense when you spoke to Mahomes and were around the Chiefs at all this summer that there was a hangover coming potentially? Because that's what this one looks like to me, man. I mean, a team that's been in the Super Bowl twice and has had, and then lost and it's, playing long seasons 2 years in a row, and Tyreek Hill dropping balls and the injuries hitting, and then the turnovers come. That reeks of Super Bowl hangover. What was your general sense of things that could have maybe even given a window into the 2-3 Chiefs start we're now seeing, Kevin?
I thought they were trying to avoid a hangover by being proactive. It was really interesting because when I spent time with Mahomes in August, it wasn't that much time, but he had said he watched the Super Bowl basically to learn what he did wrong, even though I think the entire world, including us, thinks he did almost nothing wrong in that game. He just got battered by a bad offensive line and an incredibly fast defense of Tampa Bay. But he was watching it to sort of learn. Okay, he thought he was bailing from a clean pocket too often. He made some mistakes. He thought once he got hit, he started going through his reads less and less and not making the right play. Right now with the Chiefs, this is a defensive problem. Josh Allen last night on passes over 20 yards was 5 of 6 for 213 yards, no interceptions, perfect passer rating. This is a disaster right now for the Kansas City Chiefs and their defense. I don't know how you fix it. There's no, people were asking me last night on Twitter, is there a move they can make? Well, shut down corners or top safeties, or, somebody to replace Daniel Sorensen. Those guys are not exactly on the open market in October, so it's going to be tough for them. But this was bad. I mean, Chris Jones, we talk about it all the time. Daniel Jeremiah calls it Jenga pieces, where you remove a guy and you find out very quickly how important he is. Chris Jones is obviously – we knew he was great, but to see the lack of pass rush last night when Chris Jones was out was actually quite startling. And then beyond that, they just couldn't get anything going. This was bad, and I don't know how you fix it in the sense that I don't know how you get back to being one of the AFC's top teams when this conference is really, really good. The Bills are great. The Chargers look awesome. The Bills, by the way, they game planned. They changed their whole personnel for this. I was with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott in August as well, and Beane told me that one of the reasons they took 2 pass rushers with their first 2 picks in the draft was because they watched the tape of Kansas City and they wanted to gear themselves towards that AFC Championship game and where they came up short and try to get over that hump. They put a target on the Chiefs, and the fact that they won this game in such a resounding fashion has to be a massive, massive emotional lift. I know everybody says, oh, you want to win every game, whatever. They really the amount of time in Buffalo, I heard people talk about the Chiefs, told me that they built their season around this kind of thing.
Well, it's remarkable, Kevin, that the Bills have achieved a certain level of just needing to fine-tune their roster in the offseason with a specific target in mind, the only one that could prevent them from getting to where they want to go. It's interesting you mentioned the Chargers because defensively I'm concerned about them as well, and the Browns just put 42 on them. Yeah. The Derek Carr put a third quarter on them on the Monday nighter that almost cost them the game.
Yep.
They do have a tremendous quarterback. Who do you think could be the team that? What about the Ravens who we see tonight? What team do you think would prevent the Bills? Because it sure is not coming from within the house in the AFC East. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm ready to rule out the AFC East outside of Buffalo. But no, it's funny. It would be kind of a great irony if the Bills spent all of this time trying to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs and they don't even face them in the playoffs, right? So I think that's the tier right now. I'd go Bills number 1. I would say the Chargers right behind that right now. Maybe that's recency bias. They probably should have lost yesterday, but they won. And I think that, I saw that stat. I don't know if you saw it. The Browns were the first team in history to score 40 points, not turn the ball over, and lose. Before this, teams were 463-0 in those situations, okay? The Browns played a perfect game. They just made a couple mistakes. Baker ran a really bad 2 minutes. There was a very, very, very fishy defensive pass interference call at one point. But winning games you should lose is a hallmark of a good team and a special team. I love Brandon Staley. I love Justin Herbert. I love that roster. I think the defense has problems, but so does almost every defense in the NFL right now. So I put the Chargers right beyond that, and then I would put the Ravens on that tier too. I really want to see what they look like tonight, but I'm extremely willing to be talked into the Ravens as an AFC contender. But right now it's Buffalo and everybody else. So
then break down the NFC for me in your estimation, because that NFC's already put to bed 5 weeks in. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because I think that what we saw from the Bucs last year tells me that I want to hold off on any judgments on them. And it's interesting because there's just a threshold with the cornerbacks where it becomes too much to win a Super Bowl if you don't have them. But I don't know what that is. It's almost like what we saw with the Chiefs in the offensive line play last year, right? Where it was we didn't understand how bad it was going to be until we saw it in the field one day and said, "Oh wow, they don't have an offensive line to protect Patrick Mahomes anymore, and it's the biggest game of the year." And so I'm waiting to see on the health of their defense. I don't think Richard Sherman is going to be a high-level guy if they have to actually depend on him to make huge plays. If he's just a depth guy and you put him in certain spots, I'm fine with that. That's a low-risk maneuver. But if he's what you're depending on, that's a different equation. For me right now, it's the Cowboys, and this is a tier, so I'm not ranking these teams, but I'm saying Cowboys, Cardinals, Rams, Packers, Bucks, and depending on the day, I move that around. But on our podcast, I'll send the Ringer NFL show. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys won the NFC.
You know what? You said that to us in the in the summer, and I saw you retweeted my soliloquy from a couple weeks ago saying it's time for me to give the Cowboys what they, I'm not one of those members of the media that won't give them their due when they deserve it. And you said, hey, I told you they were your surprise team in the summer. I saw that tweet, Kevin. I saw it.
I'm just reminding the people. What's funny about it, Rich, is that I talked them up on radio shows, on my podcast, on video, whatever. Talked them up for 8 months. And then the week it came time to actually have NFL predictions on our site was the week that Dak was out and that Jerry Jones was calling the Texas Rangers about Dak's shoulder. And I was like, this all seems a little weird. So I didn't even pick them to win the division. I had spent 8 months talking about this, and then the next week I was like, oh no, they look amazing. They might go to the Super Bowl. So I talked myself out of my own pick that I'd spent 8 months trying to convince other people of.
Oh, Kevin, come on. I feel for you, brother, because I thought Washington football team's going to do it too. The Eagles just had a nice win, but the Cowboys are clearly the class of the NFC. Thanks for the call, Kevin. I'm glad. I always love picking your brain, and certainly I know you're a boxing guy too. To have you on a special day like today after Fury and Wilder, and then on top of it, I saw your Twitter feed earlier this morning. At least saving you from this concept of your tweet. What's the best college football scheme podcast? And
I'm trying to learn, Rick.
Kevin, you need a hobby. Break out of it. I say this on behalf of your wife, who I've never met. Come on now. Come on.
She's lovely. I will say this. It's because University of Miami is probably going to fire their coach at some point this year, hopefully, and I just want to get an understanding of what's going on at that level. So there's a reason for it, but on the other hand, it's a deeply pathetic tweet. I'm sorry, Rick.
No, I just want to I'm trying to help you. You know what I mean? I'm trying to help you. Just watch Ted Lasso if you already haven't. I'm sure. Take care of yourself, Kevin. Okay?
Thanks, bud.
All right. That's Kevin Clark, everybody, from The Ringer. @by Kevin Clark. What's the best college football scheme podcast? I mean, good God.
That is so deep.
Oh, my gosh. It's not even playable. That's how deep it is. It's not playable.
I mean, I like sports. I don't think I like sports that much.
He's got a wife. He's got a life.
He has a wife. He just moved. He moved back to the East Coast.
Okay, very good. He's got a life. Very good. So how about this? Let's just linger on this for a second. Where do you want to be in the NFL? Here's where you want. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.